on, so it's beginning to look a little bit like fall.
That's right.
And Miss Stringer, you have a beautiful home here. How long have you lived in Benton?
We moved here in October of '63.
Were you born in Marshall County?
Oh, yes. We always lived here until the dam came. And that's when we went up to Todd County to Guthrie.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived there 23 years.
And then you came back.
Rob Earls, my husband's mother and brother, were living then, and they went too, and both of them passed away. And of course he lost his eyes in this terrible dynamite explosion. And after that he wanted to come back to Marshall County, and after they passed away we decided we'd come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the...
Well, that's both a interesting and thrilling and a sad story altogether,
Well,
isn't it?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, it
you
sure
had some
is.
good times together, and then you
Yes.
shared tragedy.
Yeah, that's right.
That's often a lot of those who get married and have children and
That's right.
husbands and wives, they get sick and
Yeah.
so on.
But that's about the worst thing that could happen to anybody.
Is to lose your
Yeah,
eyesight.
that's
Well,
right.
I'd say so myself. I don't know. To me, eyesight, I guess, is the most precious gift of all.
I think so too.
Then I sometimes
he-
I think, well, it'd be awful to be deaf, though.
Well, yes, but not as bad. We had a preacher at Guthrie and said if he had to lose either, he'd rather lose his sight than his hearing. But I don't agree with him.
No. Well, neither would be very pleasant. Let's get back to when you were born and where. Was it in the city of Benton?
No, it was, well, I don't know just where, but it was in Marshall County
Uh-huh.
in January of 1902.
Well, you're almost exactly the same age as my mother. She was born April 2nd, 1903.
Well,
And, of course, she died at age 50, so she didn't live very long, or at least it doesn't seem long to me now.
no,
But was it in, what, the Calvert or the Hardin or the Olive neighborhood? Or?
more than Olive.
Olive.
Out around up there somewhere.
And your father was,
Charlie Stringer.
and your mother?
She was a Walters, Laura Walters.
Do you remember any of your grandparents?
Oh, yes. I remember my grandfather Stringer real well. He died in 1918 of the flu. And I remember my grandfather and my grandmother Walters.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, they passed away a long time ago. And she was a Cope before she married.
Mm-hmm.
And her father's name was Leonard Cope.
Leonard. Well, that's the same name of a person both of you and I know.
I know it, and we talked about that at church one time, and we figured that we must be kin, but we couldn't trace it back, you know.
Not real close.
No, but I
still
believe it
in
was
the
the same. I believe it
same
was
general family.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
so too.
Oh well, we're all kin in Adam, aren't we?
Well, yes, that's right. That's right.
And we all go back to Noah too.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh well, that's great. That brings back some memories. The genealogist always wants us to get the names of the people in your background there. Is Stringer? That's an English name, isn't it?
I just really don't know. He had.
Or it was somewhere from the British Isles, at least. It might be
might be.
Irish. It might be Scotch.
It might be, but I just don't know. He had.
Now, what did your father do? Was he a farmer?
Yes, and when we used to live in Callaway County, up by Brooks Chapel, if you know where that community is.
Brooks's Chapel
Yeah.
Methodist Church.
Yeah,
Just
we live.
sort of east of Dexter.
That's right.
I've been there. Uh-huh.
And we moved to Marshall County when I was 5 years old, and I remember that just as well as I remember anything last week.
Well, that was a big event for you, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. And two of his neighbors helped him, and they drove the wagons, came in wagons. and I had to come with my daddy and mother. I sat up in the seat with them, and my two sisters came with the others. And I wanted to come with the others, too. I thought I was too big to come with my daddy and mother, and I didn't like it.
Oh.
And it was a cold day. It was in January. And she kept a veil over my face because she's afraid I'd take cold. And I'd keep a jerking that veil off, and she'd slap me and put it back on. And that happened all the way off and on, all the way up here.
You were showing a little independence, and you kind of wanted to be grown up.
Oh, yes, I want to be back there with my sisters, you see.
Uh-huh.
And so we got up here, and he farmed, and then a few years later, he built a little store. We had the community store there, and he sold groceries and dry goods and dishes and things like that. And I still have a lot of the dishes that came from that old store.
A lot of precious memories there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the school at that time was about a mile or more away.
What was that, Olive School?
No, it was College School, up in the eastern part of the county.
Yeah.
And so my sisters and some other children in the neighborhood walked over there, and I wanted to go, but I was too little, and they wouldn't let me go. So in 1908, my father gave him a strip of land off of his farm to build a schoolhouse. And by 1909, it was finished, and I started school.
Did they call it Stringer School?
They called it Collie. New Collie. The other one was Old Collie.
Yeah, that was Old
This was
Collie,
New Collie. So I was 7 years old when I started school. And we went there then until we got through the grades.
Those are wonderful years. I remember with a great deal of pleasure my graduation from one-room school. I went
yeah.
2 different ones. And those teachers, I sometimes think Carrie Redden, who was my first teacher I ever had, that I owe an awful lot to her. You know, if you get off on the right foot and you like to learn,
I know.
kind of keep that with you all your life.
I know.
Do you remember any of your teachers?
Oh, I remember all of them.
Well, good.
Dr. Sam Henson was my first teacher.
Well, a distinguished Marshall County.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's, I remember some funny incidents that happened during his school.
Well, tell us about them.
All right. During the class, you know, we had recitation benches, and we'd all go up front to the recitation benches.
Yeah.
And there was a poem. There was once a dear cricket who did nothing but sing through the warm summer months of summer and spring. And then on the opposite page, there was a picture of 3 men riding camels. And Dr. Henson said, he wasn't doctor then, he was Mr. Sam. And he said, what, can anybody tell me what these animals are that the people are riding? And I spoke up. I was the smart one in the class, and I said, crickets. You see, this poem had been about crickets, and he laughed. And that embarrassed me so much until the day he died. Every time he would see me, he'd call me Cricket. He never did call me Bonnie anymore. He'd always call me Cricket. And
that's the way nicknames arise sometimes.
yeah, and then when the last day of his school came, he had a program, and all the children were saying pieces. Of course, I wasn't supposed to say one because I didn't have one to say. But I jumped up without being asked and said, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and looked around him and said, now, Mr. Sam, I've done my best. And everybody began laughing. I thought they were making fun of me, and I crawled in the desk, and they like to never got me out from under that desk. I was so embarrassed because they laughed at me, you know.
Well, they probably just thought it was clever.
Oh, I guess so, but I sure
you were
got into it.
sensitive.
Yeah,
then.
yeah. And so he was my first teacher. Then Miss Ludy Washburn, Mrs. J. Gregory, was my second one. And then there was Euless Frizzell and Nevadas Turner and Homer Hartley And
You know,
Mr.
I remember Homer Hartley. He lived in Hardin
Yes.
for a long time. In
Uh-huh.
fact, now he was a tiny bit kin to me.
Was he? He taught our school 2 years successively, and then Emily Gold and Audie Cook
Uh-huh.
and Verna Petway was my last teacher.
Well, you had some good ones.
I know it.
Uh-huh.
Every one of them were good, and we enjoyed all of them. Hmm.
Great. Did you, in your school, did they do as they did many places when there are no nearby high schools? So when they got through, the students would keep going, sometimes till they were 21 years old.
Oh, they always did. I
Till they
mean,
got married, or-
we didn't, but usually they did until, because there wasn't any high school. I remember when Benton High School was the only high school in the county. And just most people didn't come to high school.
Well, you've told us some very interesting things there about school and so on, and incidents that occurred. Now, you grew up, and you eventually married.
Yeah.
Tell us about meeting your husband. Where did he come from?
Well, he was a Birmingham.
Right here in
Yeah.
Marshall County.
And the first time I ever saw him was over here at Benton. We were here for something. A bunch of us were out on the street, and we heard this man fussing about he wanted to go home. I wanted to go home, and he wasn't ready to go home. And that was his father trying to get him to go home. And I said, why don't you take that poor man home? That's the first time I ever saw him.
So, due to overhearing this, you noticed him.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. They weren't very far away, but I had no idea who either one of them was, and they didn't know me.
Now, did he finally get up enough nerve to ask you to a date, or did you go to something like a pie supper, or
Oh, I don't remember. I just don't remember.
fate threw you together?
Yeah, yeah.
You began to
That's
date
right.
one another, and then you were married. About what year was that?
24.
1924. All right. Then after you were married, what did he do for a living?
Well, he was a farmer.
Uh-huh.
And when the dam came, we went to Guthrie, and he had this big farm. This old man hadn't farmed it in a long time, had grown up, you know. And he was clearing it up. And he was so proud of that farm. And then this accident happened while he was blowing up some stumps. And he'd done that all of his life, but this was an empty fuse or something.
Mm-hmm.
It just...
And the accident rendered him blind.
Oh, yes.
So,
We went everywhere. We went to we had these doctors in Nashville, and we went to the Wheels Eye Hospital in Philadelphia, and that's supposed to be the best one, you know, in the world. And we carried him up there twice, and they said there just wasn't anything to do, you know.
so much damage to the optic
yeah.
nerve that
It just burned it so bad.
couldn't be repaired.
Couldn't be repaired.
Well, and at his age, it wasn't as though you were born blind and went to the school for the blind. I guess.
It was worse, I think.
Because he was.
He was just totally helpless after that, you know. There wasn't anything that he could do. So we did all we could.
All right. Did you have any children?
Oh, yes, I have two. You probably know Roberta Davis.
Oh, yes, I do know Roberta
She's
Davis.
my oldest one.
She and her husband have given me some radios for the museum at Murray State.
Is that right?
I don't know if they told you about it or not.
Well, I think so, since I've thought about it. I believe I heard him mention it. And he gathers clocks. He has, you ought to see his clocks. He has out at 100 or two down there.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
And he takes in old clocks and fixes them up, you know, just for the fun of doing it.
Now, did they have any children?
Yes, they have two boys.
So that means you have two grandsons.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And then my other daughter, Ida Jean, she has 3 daughters. And they live away from here.
Uh-huh.
They live in Ohio, and she lives in Missouri.
So you don't get to see them quite as often as you do the
No.
ones in Calvert
Oh,
City,
no.
of course.
No. Stephen, Roberta's oldest boy, has this miniature golf course down on 641.
Oh, he's the owner of that.
Yes.
I see.
And Larry, that's the youngest boy, he works at Goodrich.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, you at least have part of your family around, and this
Yes.
makes life a little more pleasant
I
for
couldn't do without them, I'm telling you. Everything.
I started to say, I imagine they do some things for you.
Some things, they do everything.
Yeah.
Just about everything. We just couldn't do without them at all.
Well, that is great. Well, let's see. Let's get back to some of the things that when you were starting out here, and tell us about your early memories of housekeeping. What did you have to set up housekeeping?
Well, we had very little. Still have most of it that I started out with.
In other words, back then you didn't feel as couples seem to now that
You had to have everything.
Had to have everything.
That's right.
You bought it all on time and went in debt for.
That's one thing we didn't do. We never went in debt in our lives. When we married, I was at Bowling Green, and I was in debt. Oh, I don't know, $200 or $300 that I'd borrowed over here. And that's the first thing he did when we married. He came over here and paid it off and said, "Now we're not going in debt anymore for anything." We never did.
Yeah. I remember my father felt that way, and many of the older people did. They'd gone through some terrible depressions, and they didn't want to be burdened with those debts.
And it always scared me to think about being in debt. And as far as I know, I have never owed anybody anything.
Now, I guess you had to have a sad iron.
Oh, yes, sure. Still got them. Oh, yeah.
Those things, I still have my mother's.
Yeah.
They were hard to use, though, weren't
Oh, yes. Had to keep a hot stove to heat them on. And
you had a wood stove.
oh, yes, sure.
Well, did you have a safe?
A dish safe?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, those things bring pretty well at sales.
I know it. I don't have one now, but I did originally. And,
let's see, I suppose you had to have, of course, a bedstead. And
yes. And I got rid of all of mine, though, and the ones I have now was Robert's grandmother's that she began keeping house with.
Mm-hmm.
I gave Steve and Roberta's boy one, and I gave Roberta one, and I still have the other one, but I had 3 of her old beds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't take anything for them, of course. And I have her old dressers, his grandmother's dressers.
Mm-hmm.
And that chair over there, I had several chairs of hers.
Oh,
Grandma
that's
loves
beautiful.
children.
That's
Yes.
an embossed back.
I have 6 of those. And I have quite a few of her things,
Now,
dishes and
what
things.
were some of the things that you tried to do together with the neighbors, such as, well, let's say you never tried to kill hogs by yourself, did you?
Oh, no. He always had a bunch of men to help him.
Mm-hmm. And the women would come in and they'd fix a meal for the men who, of course, that was awfully hard work then.
I know it.
You had to take those hogs and slosh them up and down in a barrel, and a lot of times they weighed 400 or 500 pounds.
I know it. But the meat was really good, those hams.
It was.
Yeah.
And the day you killed, you frequently you didn't have very much fresh meat, at least we didn't. Because we didn't have a refrigerator. No.
Well, we didn't either, but.
So, eating that fresh sausage.
Oh, yes, there was none better.
Backbone and ribs, and even the liver was good.
I know it. All of it was good.
Yeah.
You don't get that kind of meat now in the stores. You just can't buy it.
No, not.
And the ham that you buy in the stores is not good like we used to have.
I guess it's not quite the same.
It's too tough or something. I don't know, but I just don't like it as well.
Maybe memory has softened it up a lot.
Well, probably so. But we always had plenty of meat and everything else to eat, that people would grow. And
Well, did you ever have quilting parties from house to house?
well, not really a party, but we'd help each other a lot, like somebody would help us and then we'd help them, but it wouldn't be a party.
You'd hang these things up in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And, then
I still have my quilting frames out in the garage.
you do?
Yeah, they're up overhead in the garage, and I'd like to get rid of them if anybody wanted them. I don't think anybody quilts now, though, like they
They
used to.
probably don't, but they might buy them for souvenirs.
Well, probably, but I'm not in any hurry to get rid of them. They're not in the way, and so they're just there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I hear a little chime from the clock. That's
Yeah.
a beautiful sound.
Henry made that clock.
He did?
Yeah, he made it.
Well, he had a lot of ability and talent there.
If you're ever in Calvert, I want you to go by and see his clocks.
Uh-huh.
He's just got any
I'd like
size
to
or
do
any
that.
kind.
This Paul Gallimore here
Yeah.
had a number of clocks.
Does he still have?
Well, now, I don't know about
I
that.
saw him at one time, but Henry has a lot more than he had.
What I was thinking about was the fact that he could just repair about anything.
Yes. Well, I think Henry can
In other
too.
words, you can take him a clock.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
say, now, I never saw a clock like this. I don't know what in the world makes it run. And he said, well, let me look at it.
Yeah. Well,
And pretty soon, he'd
Henry
have it.
fixes clocks. He can fix them up.
Very good. Well, tell us something about the joys you had maybe in, big events in the county. Did you look forward to going to big singing?
Oh, we always came, but I wasn't especially interested in it.
Well, did you like Tater Day better?
Well, same. I just never did care about being in crowds. I don't even go up here now at Tater Day or big singing either because, I just don't care that much about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Did you and your husband ever leave the area and, say, go to Detroit?
oh, no. And when we moved up yonder, it was the first move we'd ever made when the dam came,
Did you ever buy a train ticket in Benton and ride off somewhere?
Well, not that I remember.
Yeah, I thought maybe you could tell us about a big train trip you might have taken.
We used to go to Bowling Green on the train when we were in school, and we thought that was big. We'd change in Paris, Tennessee, and we thought that was a big trip.
Why, it was a big trip.
Yeah.
My,
Mhm.
that would have been over 150 miles. So.
You want to tell me about my schools that I used to teach?
Oh, I certainly do. Well,
Union Ridge was the first one. You know where Union Ridge is.
Uh-huh.
And every morning we would sing. The whole school would sing, but that would be before 8 o'clock. We didn't really start school till 8.
You led the singing.
No, I didn't. Clarence Leneve led the singing.
Clarence Leneve. Why,
Yes.
he's a song leader now at,
I think the Central Church, isn't it?
oh, what is the name of that church?
I don't remember. He
can't-
comes up here to church during our meetings,
I see him every now and then, and I used to
Oh, he was a
park
singer.
my car with him. He's a great singer.
He was a good singer then, and we'd always depend on
Clement
him.
Street.
Yeah, that's right, Clement Street. Clement Street.
And so you were very fortunate to have one of the best singers in the United States right there.
I know it. Hmm.
I can recall singing at school in those early days, and we sang mostly the Little Brown Church in the Vale, and
We'd have songbooks there, and we'd sing in the songbooks, just the
Mhm.
real songs. And everybody enjoyed it, even the little ones, we'd all sing.
Oh, I can remember one of my favorites was on Jordan's stormy banks I stand.
Yeah, I remember
Cast a
that.
wistful eye.
I remember that too. And then
All right, go
my
ahead.
next school was Oak Valley. And
You know they're having a reunion at Oak Valley, the third Saturday in August.
I know. And we played basketball. We had a good team of boys, big boys, and we were aiming to play in the fair over here when it was down on the creek, you know. You know when they used to have the fair down there?
I've forgotten that.
Down where A.B. Ray's is now in the grandstand, it faced the creek, but the basketball court was down there. And we were supposed to play, and it rained all day, and everything was so muddy. We didn't get to play ball.
Didn't get to play.
And I'll never forget down there one day, I looked out the window. I was up front, and Solon Peck was one of the big boys that went to school,
Mm-hmm.
And I looked out and I saw this man coming around with a big red scarf around a bandana handkerchief around his neck, and he had a long knife. The blade was that long, the best I remember. And he came up on the porch, and Ruby Allen was one of our big girls, and she was sitting back there. And he called her out. And when she went out on the porch, she screamed and fell down on the floor. I thought he had stabbed her. And I was scared to death. And I said, so? And then the man came in, and he was coming right straight towards me, looking at me, you know. Still had his knife in his hand. I said,
this is scary.
I know it. I said, Solon, come up here. And he came right quick and stood by, and he said, what do you want, or something like that. I said, you stand right here. And come to find out the man was a neighbor, and all the children knew him. They weren't afraid at all. And he had been cutting tobacco, and that's the reason he had this on his neck, and he had his tobacco knife in his hand. And Ruby's father had got seriously hurt, and he came to tell her about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came up and told me what he told her, you see, and so that was what the excitement was about. But that's the biggest scare I ever got in my life.
But not knowing at all.
Sure, I didn't know him. I never had seen him or anything. But all the children knew him, and they weren't scared at all, you see.
I have my tobacco knife and my dad's tobacco knife. Of course, every person big enough to work then had a tobacco knife.
Oh, yeah.
And it had a long stem on it, sort of. The blade itself was probably only, anywhere from 4 to 6 inches across. But the stem on it and the handle at the top would be maybe 24 inches long or longer.
Well, the best I remember, that knife, the blade was that long.
Yeah.
It looked bad to me.
Bigger. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand how that would be very, very frightening. Well, did you teach any other places?
Yes, I taught 6 years in all, and I taught Gilbertsville, the primary grades. I had the first 4 grades.
Mm-hmm.
And Talma Thompson, he's out here at the restaurant now, Lake Haven. He taught the upper grades, and Paul Newton was the high school teacher. That's the only 3 we had. And I boarded at Mr. Earl Hall's, and the railroad was between us and the schoolhouse, and we had to cross it going to school. And a bunch of children from that around us, we'd always walk to school together. And so this train had stopped on the tracks, and we didn't have time to wait, and we just crawled under and went on.
Crawled under the train?
I know it, and when
That's terribly dangerous.
we didn't realize it though, and so when we got back that afternoon, I told Mr. Earl about it. Oh, it made him fierce. Said, if I ever hear y'all doing that again, I'll whip every one of you. Said, don't you ever do that again. Well, we got through all right and went on to school, you see.
Yeah.
So I remember that very well.
I believe that's one of the most dramatic stories I've ever heard. And unfortunately, our time's about gone. Do you have any special final thing you'd like to say?
Well, no, not that I know of. I guess I could think of something later, but now I can't.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to talk with you, and we thank you very much, Miss Bonnie Stringer Love. And we've been visiting with her for our oral history broadcast today here in Benton, Kentucky at 1100 Birch Street. This is Ray Mofield. We return you to our studio.